Did you know that radishes are more closely related to cabbage and cauliflower than they are to beetroot and yam? And also, did you know we can grow them right here in Trinidad from seed, 100% organic, super simple, easy, and affordable? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, thank you all so much for joining in. This is Alan from the Trini Gardener channel, and I can't tell you how happy I am that you made it for this video because we're going to be talking about growing radish. Now, radish is a crop that you don't really think about when it comes to gardening in Trinidad. It usually is one of those crops that you see it, you see people away. Sorry, there's like a worm or oh yeah, I thought it was a yeah. Usually don't see a lot of people growing radish in Trinidad or even in the Caribbean. It's generally something that you see more foreigners growing it in the States, in Europe. They grow radish and it's a very popular food over there. But we can grow it right here in Trinidad. It's actually one of those things that you might think isn't for Trinidad, but it can grow. And this variety here that I have specifically, this is the French breakfast radish that I grew from seed, and I think this is a really good variety of radish to grow here because it's nice and crisp, it's sweet. This is actually a bit older than I usually like to harvest them. Normally I would harvest this when it was probably about 2-3 weeks ago. I would have harvested this. It would have been a bit sweeter, but I was trying to keep it in the container so that I can have it on the video. But usually this is something that you want to harvest within 5 weeks of planting it from seed. It's a fast crop, so within 5 weeks from the seed you have radish. Pull it out and just bite it, just so skin and everything, like a savage. But it is a really cool crop to grow. That again, it's not a foreigner crop. It's something we can grow right here in Trinidad. You can grow it from seed. French breakfast variety. For me, that's just one of the best ones. It's a really nice, of course, beautiful red color, this crimson red color radish. Now, as you can see, radish it's not very picky at all when it comes to the type of container that you grow it in. These here are in a laundry bottle, the laundry, sorry, not laundry bottle, but a laundry detergent bottle. Just cut in half, wash it out, put the soil inside there. The roots are very shallow, so you see that you don't have any problem with not having a deep enough container. It's one of those things that it gives you that leeway to just sort of be creative. And if you have some space in your garden, even if it's like any little old tray, you can try growing radish, and more than likely you're going to have success with your radish. Now we're going to start talking about the soil that we're going to be using for our radish. Now, radish does not like a rich, loamy soil that's full of organic matter. Now that's going to be a bit strange for you to hear me say, because normally every single crop that I talk about, I always talk about a nice rich soil that's full of organic matter, but that's not the case when it comes to radish. Radish actually likes what I call leftover soil. So like for instance, when I'm growing my radish, I would use soil that I previously had grown something else that's like a heavy feeder in that soil, and then whatever is left over afterwards, instead of re-amending and planting back something in that soil, which I could of course do, if I want to grow radish, I'll just take the soil as it is, deplete it, and grow the radish inside. What will happen with radish? The tops of the radish, it will become really massive, big, bushy if you use something that's really rich in nutrition, something that's really full of really good compost. And that's not going to be good because that's not what you're growing the radish for. You're growing it for the root itself. So to avoid that happening, where you're going to have big leaves and basically nothing over there, you'll probably just have like a little stem, a little red stem. For your radish, I prefer to use something that's like leftover soil, or soil that I know is not the best soil at all, that doesn't have a lot of manure in it, doesn't have a lot of really anything. Just think about the poorest soil that you can think of. That's probably going to be better for your radish. Now, of course, it does need some nutrition. It's going to take something like just red sand and plant your radish in, but try not to use anything that's too rich. Don't amend it with anything. No worm castings for your radish. It really is not. It's going to hurt the plant rather than help the plant. It's sort of one of those things where you can kill your plant with kindness by giving it too much of what it doesn't need, and then it just doesn't perform well for you. So here I have a container where I was growing peppers before. I grew a Cubanelle pepper, and I got a lot of Cubanelle peppers from this soil. So this soil really was used, and we would have drained a lot of the nutrition that was in this soil. Now this would have been a mix of cow manure. I think there's a little bit of chicken manure in here, and there's some wood compost, tiny bit of topsoil, but mostly compost, so really rich. and with all of the peppers. Now, peppers can be a sort of a mid-range to heavier feeder, and that would have drained a lot of the nutrition in this soil. Normally, what I would have done if I want to plant back peppers or tomatoes with this soil is I would have amended it, put back some compost inside of the soil, and then plant back something like that. Because today we're going to be talking about radish, I'm going to be just simply using the soil as is. You don't need too much of soil to grow radish because the roots are not very deep. It doesn't have a big taproot. So we're just going to be removing some of the soil. I don't want to use all this soil on radish because it's going to be wasted soil. You know, it's sort of one of those things where you don't want to say wasted soil, but really it's not necessary. Sometimes, you know, more is less. So I'm just going to take out some of the soil. And here I have my radish seeds. These seeds, you can soak it like probably maybe 12 hours, like overnight, if you want to help it germinate faster, if you have a fear of something stealing your seeds. But because this is in a container and I know I'm going to put this somewhere safe, I'm not going to be soaking these. I'm just going to be putting this into the container. What I would like to do, however, is because of the size of this container, you see there's a certain amount of surface area that I have to work with. I'm going to be thinning out the radish once they start to germinate. So I'm putting a seed in a few different places just to see how many will germinate, and then based on how much I see germinating, I'm going to thin it out to maybe 2 to 3 radishes in this container here because I want to give it enough space, because if it doesn't have space and it becomes too, you know, sort of boxed in, it's not going to grow to the full potential, the full size of the radish that you could potentially get from this container here. It will probably end up struggling because it's competing for space. Not so much nutrients, but mostly competing for space. And if the roots are touching one another, they don't do too well to be planted too close to each other. Now, when it comes to watering your radish, you want to make sure that your radish never goes completely bone dry. Radish does like to have a fair, nicely moist surface for it to grow, especially for the germination process. You want to make sure that the seeds never go dry, but also when the plant is growing, you know, it doesn't require a lot of nutrition, but it wants to have access to whatever nutrients there are in the soil itself. If it goes dry, then the roots start to feel stressed, the plant feels stressed, and that could cause problems with the plant itself, and you don't want that to happen. Remember, it is a root crop, and root crops want to be able to pierce the soil to, you know, all plants really want to pierce the soil so that it can go down. So make sure that you're keeping your soil nice and moist, nothing too wet, because I mean with root crop, especially if you have root rot taking place because the water just can't drain out, then you're going to have problems. Like for instance, in this container here, you probably can't see that, but there are drainage holes that I just sort of slice into the bottle here. Now, if we are doing it in like a bucket or in like any kind of container, you know, just heat a knife, or if you have like a soldering iron, and just punch some holes into the bottom and maybe a little bit higher as well. That will be good for making sure that the soil itself doesn't get too waterlogged, but also making sure that your soil itself is always nice and moist. In terms of sunlight, it's a very important topic because, so radishes, as I said, a lot of people mistake it to be just a foreigner's crop, but you can have it in Trinidad. The trick, however, is that radish is usually a not summer crop, right? So Trinidad, we have mostly summer weather, summer climate in Trinidad. It's usually hot in Trinidad, and no matter where you live, even if you're in Parliament, you're still going to have hot heat compared to somebody who lives like in Florida, or, you know, somebody who lives, you know, like in England or something like that, right? So generally in those countries, you want to plant your radish when it is springtime or when it is fall time. That's the two periods where the plant is going to have the perfect temperature, because radish is a cool weather crop. People generally plant this as one of the first crops after the winter, or one of the last crops just before autumn comes into play. And we need to take pattern from that, because if in Trinidad with our summer sun, our summer weather, we put the radish out in full sun, like what we do with tomatoes and baigan and peppers, where we give it as much sun as possible, the radish can feel stressed, and if it's stressed, it's going to bolt. Remember we talked about bolting, especially when we did the brassicas videos, growing cabbage, growing cauliflower, growing broccoli. I'll put one of those videos up here so you can have a look. In that case, we talked about having too much of sun, too much of heat, making the plant not produce a fruit, or produce, like in the case of the brassicas, a head, but rather making the plant stress out and then it would send up a stem, produce a flower, and once it produces that flower, you get seeds and you no longer get a crop. Now, if you want to have seeds, go right ahead and give your radish a lot of sun. But if that is not your main intention to have radish seeds, you want to have a radish, then take my advice and give your radish some partial shade. What is partial shade? You're going to find a spot in your property where the sun is going to be passing and be on the radish. It does need to get some sun. Don't put it in a shed where it's just going to be in shade all day, but make sure that it's getting maybe 4-5 hours of sun and no more than that. If all you have is sunlight, like direct sunlight in your property, especially have it in containers and put your radish out in the sun for some time, maybe 2 or 3 hours in the morning time, put it back inside the house. I know it's a bit of work, but it's in containers. That's the purpose of having containers, to be able to move it around. Put it in the shade maybe during the heat of the day, and then in the evening, maybe around like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, put it back out for another 2 hours and bring it back, because you don't want your radish to feel stressed. It's not a hot, heated weather kind of crop. It really wants to have cooler temperatures. It can't support our Trinidadian temperature. These have been getting, I think, around like 4 hours of direct sunlight for the day. I think it gets like maybe 3.5 hours in the morning time, maybe just like half an hour in the evening time, based on the position where I put it in the property here. And that's, you see the results for yourself. It is growing and it is pretty much here at maturity. So you don't really have to worry about giving it too much of sun. It's better to give it less sun than more sun in Trinidad. If you're living somewhere foreign, you're living, well, foreign for Trinidad, so you're living somewhere in the States, or you're living somewhere in Europe, or even like Canada, and you have your radish, give it full sun. Give your radish full sun if you're growing it in the right time. So that for you all would be, if you're not in Trinidad, then you're, well, not in Trinidad, but you're, more north of the equator, or a lot more south, like in Peru, for whatever reason you're watching the video, then you want to plant your radish just after you have your last frost, maybe like 2 weeks after your last frost. Put your radish out, your seeds out, and then, you're going to be harvesting that within the month, and you can keep on succession planting radish. Remember, I talked about succession planting in this video. You can click the link over here, where you don't need to put all your radish to grow at the same time. Especially if you're in Trinidad, don't put all your radish at the same time to grow. Have them at different stages. You plant a set of radish this week, wait another 2 weeks, plant with another set. So that way, when you're harvesting, you're going to be able to harvest, use out that harvest within 2 weeks, and then have another harvest to go after those 2 weeks, rather than planting all your radish at the same time, harvesting all at the same time. Then you have a glut, and then you have to wait again for radish to produce. Now, radish doesn't take very long. I think within 5 weeks you should be fine to harvest your radish, and it's better to pick it younger than older. These again are a little bit on the older side because I was waiting to do the video, but generally within 5 weeks, 6 weeks maximum, you should be pulling your radish and eating it. And if you don't have a radish root at that point in time, pull out the entire plant and plant it again, because radish really doesn't want to take more than, if you're waiting 2 months, 3 months for radish, then something has probably gone wrong. So don't worry about it. Just keep on trying and you're going to be fine with your radish itself. With nutrition, remember, as I said, you don't need to worry too much about anything with your radish. The least nutritious soil that you can give your radish is going to be better for you, and that's going to give you a better fruit than giving it something with a lot of organic matter, a lot of compost, and then having massive tops and no root to talk about. Now, I know we kind of touched on this when I was planting out the radish, but if you are growing radish not in containers, but you're doing it like in ground or in a raised bed, you want to make sure that your spacing is between 6 inches to 12 inches between your radish itself. Don't put the radish too close, because if it's too close, it's too boxed up, it's not going to grow well. And don't put it too far, because it doesn't need that much space. It does need some space, but if you have a seed here, 6 inches, another seed, then you're fine. That's going to be more than enough space for your radish. But just be aware of it and not take the spacing for granted when you are doing radish. And there you go. That's everything for growing your own homegrown organic radish in a container, in ground, whatever you need to do. You can do it with radish. It's going to be a cool project, I think, especially if you want to do it with kids, because kids tend to get really frustrated and they lose patience easily. Like if you're doing carrots and you have to wait like 3 months to even more to get a proper carrot, it's easy for them to want to pull it up too soon. But with radish, because it's just 4 or 5 weeks and you have your radish, it's a better way to get kids into gardening and just keeping them excited from that young age. Remember, if you know someone, of course, who would be interested in growing more healthy organic food or growing something sort of exotic, we don't really have too much of this being grown in Trinidad like radish, then feel free to share this video and share the channel with them to help them to grow more healthy homegrown food that they can do in a way that is very, very affordable, in a way that is 100% organic without any kind of chemicals, and will help them to, sustain themselves and their family, be more self-sustainable, and just see about their own food security. Remember, of course, you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and on Facebook for more videos and pictures of things going on in Trini Gardener's garden. Remember to feel free to tag us on any of those platforms because it's such a motivation to see you all in your gardens, taking my advice, but also doing your own thing and even sharing some of your tips. I'm so happy when you all leave comments to give me ideas of what I could do, places I could go to get, seedlings or whatever the case is. I'm just so happy to interact with you all and just to see what you all are getting up to in your garden. Remember, as always, this is Dylan from the Trini Gardener channel reminding you to get up and get growing. Take care.